Michael was 12 when his father died. His mother cried every night. Michael felt sad but decided to help. He found a job at a bakery. Every morning he carried heavy bags of flour. It was hard work, but Michael didn't stop. He wanted to help his family. Michael spent his days working at the nearby farm. He carried heavy buckets of water, fed the animals, and cleaned the stables. The work was hard and the pay was small, but Michael didn't complain. Every evening he brought his earnings home and placed the coins in his mother's hand. "Here, Mama," he said one night. She smiled weakly and replied, "Thank you, Michael." But he could see the tiredness in her eyes and the worry she tried to hide. Lily, too young to understand the struggles around her, sat in the corner playing with her dolls. Her laughter filled the cold, quiet house, bringing a moment of warmth. Michael watched her, his heart heavy but determined. "I must protect her," he thought, clenching his fists. Michael woke up early every day. He cleaned the house and helped his mother cook. After that, he went to work at the bakery. The owner, Mr. Turner, was kind. "You are a hard worker, Michael," he said. Michael smiled, but inside he felt tired. He missed being a child. Lily often waited for Michael at the door. When he came home, she ran to him and hugged him tightly. "Did you bring bread, Michael?" she asked. Michael laughed and gave her a small loaf. "Yes, Lily, it's for you," he said. Her happiness made all his hard work worth it. One evening, Michael found his mother sitting quietly by the window. She looked tired and pale. "What's wrong, Mama?" he asked. Clara sighed and said, "I'm just worried, Michael. You work so hard, and I feel useless. I can't help you or Lily like I want to." Michael knelt beside her and held her hand. "Don't say that, Mama. You take care of us in so many ways. You're the heart of this family." His words made her smile, but Michael could see the sadness in her eyes. That night, he made a promise to himself. No matter how hard life became, he would make sure his family was safe and happy. The next day, Michael asked Mr. Turner if he could take on more hours at the bakery. "Are you sure, boy?" Mr. Turner asked. "You're already working a lot." Michael nodded. "Yes, sir. I need to earn more money for my family." Mr. Turner admired Michael's determination and agreed. Michael's days became even longer. He woke up before sunrise to start his work and didn't come home until late in the evening. His hands were often sore and his feet ached, but he kept going. Every coin he earned went to his mother for food and clothes. Sometimes he stayed up late at night, sewing patches onto his old clothes because they were too worn to wear. Despite the struggles, Michael never complained. He believed that one day things would get better. Lily, now 5 years old, often waited for Michael at the door. "Michael, can we play?" she would ask, holding her favorite doll. Michael was always tired, but he smiled and said, "Of course, Lily." He spent a few minutes with her, telling stories or pretending to have tea parties. Her laughter was the best part of his day. One day, as Michael walked home from the bakery, he saw a group of boys his age playing football in the field. He stopped and watched them for a moment. He wanted to join them, but he knew he couldn't. his family needed him more. With a heavy heart, he turned and walked away. As time passed, Michael became stronger, but life didn't get easier. His mother's health was getting worse. She coughed often and looked weaker each day. Michael knew they couldn't afford a doctor. One evening, Clara called Michael to her side. "Michael," she said softly, "you've been so brave, but I worry about you. You're just a boy and you've taken on so much." Michael shook his head. "I'm not a boy anymore, Mama. I have to take care of you and Lily." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You shouldn't have to carry this burden alone," she whispered. The next day, Michael decided to look for more work. He walked to a nearby farm and spoke to Mr. Harris, the farmer. "Do you have any work for me, sir?" Michael asked. Mr. Harris looked at him and said, "You're a hard worker, Michael. I could use help with the animals." Michael accepted the job, even though it meant waking up earlier and sleeping even later. Now, Michael spent his mornings at the bakery and his afternoons on the farm. He cleaned the stables, fed the animals, and carried heavy buckets of water. By the time he came home, his body ached, but he didn't complain. Each night, he sat by his mother's bedside and told her about his day. Lily often fell asleep in his lap, her tiny hands clutching his shirt. One evening, as he walked home from the farm, Michael felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. The stars shone brightly in the sky, and he stopped to look at them. "Papa," he whispered, "I hope you see me. I'm trying my best." Tears filled his eyes, but he quickly wiped them away. He couldn't show his sadness. His family needed him to be strong. The days turned into weeks, and Michael's hard work started to pay off. He saved enough money to buy more food for the house and even a warm blanket for his mother. Though life was still difficult, Michael felt a small sense of hope. He believed that one day things would get better. Winter arrived, bringing cold winds and heavy snow. The small house where Michael and his family lived felt even colder than usual. Michael gave his blanket to Lily at night, wrapping it tightly around her. "You need it more than me," he said with a smile. She hugged him and whispered, "You're the best brother in the world." Her words warmed his heart, but Michael couldn't stop worrying about their mother. Clara's cough was worse, and her hands were always cold. Michael worked harder than ever, but no matter how much he earned, it never felt like enough. One evening, after a long day at the farm, Michael came home to find Lily sitting by the fire, crying. "What's wrong, Lily?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She wiped her eyes and pointed to their mother, who was lying on the bed. "Mama won't wake up," she said softly. Michael's heart sank. He rushed to Clara's side and gently shook her shoulder. "Mama," he called, his voice trembling. Clara opened her eyes slowly. "I'm fine, Michael," she whispered, but her voice was weak. Michael knew she wasn't fine. The next day, Michael went to Mr. Turner at the bakery. "Sir, I need to leave early today," he said. Mr. Turner looked at him with concern. "Is everything all right, Michael?" Michael hesitated, then said, "My mother is very sick. I need to take care of her." Mr. Turner nodded. "Go home, son. Family comes first." Michael ran back to the house, determined to help his mother. He made her soup, cleaned the house, and tried to keep Lily entertained. But no matter how much he did, he couldn't stop the fear growing in his heart. One night, as Michael sat by his mother's bed, she reached for his hand. "Michael," she said softly, "you've grown into a fine young man. Your father would be so proud of you." Michael's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't let them fall. "I just want you to get better, Mama," he said. Clara smiled weakly. "I know, my dear, but sometimes life is not fair. You must stay strong for Lily." Michael nodded, though his heart was breaking. The days grew colder, and food became scarce. Michael often skipped meals so that his mother and Lily could eat. His face looked thinner and his clothes were worn, but he didn't care. All that mattered was keeping his family safe. One morning, as Michael prepared to leave for work, Clara called him back. "Michael," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." He sat beside her, holding her frail hand. "What is it, Mama?" he asked. She hesitated for a moment, then said, "You can't keep doing this alone. You need help." Michael shook his head. "I'm fine, Mama. I'll take care of everything." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You're still a child, Michael. This isn't fair to you." Michael looked down, his heart heavy. He knew his mother was right, but he didn't see any other choice. Who else would help them? He gave her a small smile and said, "Don't worry about me, Mama. I'm strong." At the bakery, Mr. Turner noticed that Michael seemed more tired than usual. "Michael, you've been working too hard," he said. "Take the afternoon off and rest." Michael wanted to argue, but he was too exhausted to refuse. He walked home slowly, thinking about what his mother had said. Maybe she was right. Maybe he couldn't do everything alone. When Michael reached the house, he found Lily sitting outside, shivering in the cold. "Lily, why are you out here?" he asked, wrapping his coat around her. She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Mama won't wake up again," she whispered. Michael felt his chest tighten. He rushed inside and found his mother lying still on the bed. Her face was pale, and her breathing was shallow. "Mama," he called, shaking her gently. She opened her eyes slowly and smiled. "Don't be afraid, Michael," she said. "You've been so brave." Michael knelt beside her, holding her hand tightly. "I can't lose you, Mama," he whispered. Clara stroked his cheek. "You won't lose me. I'll always be with you, in your heart." With those words, she closed her eyes and fell asleep. Michael sat there, his tears falling freely. He felt as though the world had stopped. The house felt emptier than ever. Clara's passing left a void that Michael didn't know how to fill. Lily didn't understand what had happened at first. "When will Mama wake up?" she asked one evening, holding her doll tightly. Michael knelt down and gently hugged her. "Mama is with Papa now," he said softly. "She won't come back, but she's watching over us." Lily began to cry, and Michael held her close, trying to stay strong for her. The days that followed were the hardest Michael had ever faced. He had to figure out how to manage everything on his own. He continued working at the bakery and the farm, but now he also had to take care of Lily. He cooked for her, helped her get dressed, and made sure she stayed warm. Every night, he tucked her into bed and told her a story. Most of the time, they were stories about their parents, memories that made them both smile, even if only for a moment. Despite his efforts, Michael sometimes felt like he was failing. The house was cold, and there was barely enough food. His clothes were falling apart, and his hands were rough from work. But every time he felt like giving up, he looked at Lily. Her laughter, her bright eyes, they reminded him why he couldn't stop. I have to keep going, he told himself, for her. One evening, after a long day at the farm, Mr. Harris called Michael aside. "You've been working hard, boy," he said. "I've been thinking, how would you like to come work here full time? You and your sister could live in the small cottage on the farm. It's not much, but it's warm and safe." Michael stared at him in disbelief. "Are you serious, sir?" he asked. Mr. Harris nodded. "You've earned it, Michael. You deserve a chance to build a better life." Michael went home that night and told Lily the news. "We're moving to the farm," he said with a smile. Lily's face lit up. "Really? Will it be warm?" she asked. Michael nodded. "Yes, and we'll be safe." For the first time in a long time, Michael felt hope. He knew the road ahead would still be hard, but he also knew they would make it together. Michael and Lily moved to the farm the following week. The small cottage was simple but cozy, with a fireplace that kept them warm during the cold nights. For the first time in months, Michael felt a sense of relief. He no longer worried about whether Lily would have enough to eat or if she would grow cold during the winter. Every morning, Michael woke up early and worked on the farm, feeding animals and tending to the crops. Lily played in the fields, her laughter echoing across the land. Michael would often stop and watch her, a smile spreading across his face. She was growing stronger, happier, and so was he. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Michael sat outside the cottage, looking at the stars. Lily joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Do you think Mama and Papa are watching us?" she asked softly. Michael nodded, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I know they are, Lily. They're proud of us, of you." Lily smiled and said, "I want to be like you, Michael, brave and strong." Michael felt a lump in his throat. He had spent so much time worrying about protecting her that he hadn't realized how much she had been watching him. "You already are, Lily," he said, wrapping his arm around her. "You're the reason I never gave up." As they sat together under the night sky, Michael thought about everything they had been through. The pain, the loss, the struggle. It had all brought them to this moment. Life would never be perfect, but they had each other, and that was enough. Michael closed his eyes and whispered a silent promise to his parents. "I will make sure Lily grows up happy and safe. I will live a life that makes you proud." The wind carried his words away, but in his heart, he felt their presence, and for the first time, Michael allowed himself to hope, not just for survival, but for a future full of love, laughter, and dreams.